Thank you, Donald, and good evening, everybody. Italy, the third biggest country in Europe by population, and a very dramatic set of election results. If you haven't heard, the Five-Star Movement, the anti-establishment movement founded by comedian Beppe Grillo. When I say comedian, I mean, you know, he was the most famous comedian in the country. It's a bit like maybe a few years ago, Tommy Cooper setting up a party in this country. And he started this party off with an internet genius called Gianroberto Casaleggio. And they set this party up to be run and organised purely online. They were anti-corruption, anti-establishment, sceptical in many ways about the euro and the European Union, very pro-environmental policies, and they have achieved 32.6% of the vote in a country that is run under proportional representation. 1 in 3 voters have voted for the Five-Star Movement. What about the established parties? Well, the Democratic Party, led by Mr. Renzi, the former Prime Minister, so they are the Social Democrat stroke Socialist soft centre-left party, who a couple of elections ago got 40%, and they've sunk to 18.7%. Then we have the League, the Lega, as they're known in Italy, formerly the Northern League, because they wanted the north to break away from the south of Italy, but they rebranded as the League in an attempt to get votes in the south as well. They are the absolute Eurosceptics, led by a guy called Salvini, and they got 17.4%. And then the evergreen, mind you, with all those facelifts, I'm not surprised, Berlusconi, with Forza Italia, has got 14% of the vote. They are the big numbers in the Italian election. The whole thing's of great interest to me because the Five-Star Movement and I, Beppe Grillo and I, in 2014, did a deal together and formed a European parliamentary group. In previous times, I've done deals with the Northern League, and I know Berlusconi because when I was first an MEP, believe it or not, he was an MEP. So I know these guys. I've met all these guys. But this is a massive anti-establishment vote. It is a big shift towards Euroscepticism, and it is, I think, a sign that the end of the EU is nigh. Because why are they rebelling against the establishment? They're doing it, yes, because they're dissatisfied with the euro, but they're doing it primarily because migration has become the fault line in European politics, and all the Social Democrat, socialist parties are seen to be just simply too soft on this issue. So when we look at this amazing situation that the anti-establishment Five-Star Movement has now become Italy's biggest party, that in some way there'll be a coalition over the course of the next few months, that the leader of the Lega, the League, Matteo Salvini, in his press conference today said the euro is the wrong currency and the wrong choice. He's basically declared war on Mr. Juncker, Barnier and the European Commission. We ask ourselves, where are we going with this? Does this Italian result mean that actually the end of the European project is nigh? Is what's happened today a logical follow-on from Brexit? And if you think, no, Nigel, you're wrong. The European Union's in great shape. We don't worry about these mad Italians. It doesn't mean very much. Call me on 0345 6060 973. Or if you think, as I do, that Mr. Juncker would have his head deeply sunk into a glass with depression tonight, thinking that actually his project's fallen to pieces, then text to 84850. Or maybe you think these people may be anti-establishment, but within time they'll all become pro-establishment because they'll enjoy the trappings of office. Then, of course, tweet using the hashtag Farage and LBC at LBC. And, of course, you can watch us on Facebook and comment there too. I'm live here from LBC's London studio. So what happens next with these makeups? Well, in theory, the Five-Star Movement and the Northern League together just about have between them 50% of the vote, and they could pick up one of the much smaller parties and get over the line. And if they did that, that would be the government. However, Salvini, who is a hardline Eurosceptic. In fact, to be honest, he wants Italy to leave the European Union. Of that, there's no doubt at all. He says no, he wants a centre-right coalition. Although to me, looking at the numbers between him, Forza Italia, and the really hard-right Brothers of Italy, they're nowhere near 50%. But the Five Star Movement, a populist movement, an anti-establishment movement, but in no way could it be called a right-wing movement, because it simply isn't. But, you know, whichever way you cut this, these are very dramatic results in Italy. My view has always been that Brexit, Trump, all those big events of 2016 marked the beginning of a massive change in Western politics. The nation state is back. People want controlled immigration, they want patriotism, and they're concerned about their identity and indeed their culture. And I take the view that these results in Italy are just a continuation of that trend, one that I think will go on for years to come. Tell me I'm wrong. Tell me these are short-term blips. Tell me these are just outbursts of anger. And in the end, normal service, a la Blair or Clinton, will be resumed. And you can do that by calling me on 0345 6060973. John is calling me from Helsham. John, do you think these results in Italy have significance?
Yeah, good evening, Nigel. I would like to say the results we've seen today in Italy definitely show this country, we've done the right thing going for Brexit. We've got a brilliant future going forward, and I do really hope Theresa May's going to get us the Brexit we want. And in Parliament today, we saw her up against Jeremy Corbyn. I think she totally slated that man. We've got to give Theresa May a little bit of credit. Let's hope she can go forward. And I think, without a shadow of doubt, the hierarchy in the Parliament in Brussels are going to be seriously worried about this result today.
Oh, they'll be very worried indeed, John. Did you notice, by the way, at question time, Jeremy Corbyn, new suit, new shirt, new tie, he was looking like a Blairite smoothie, wasn't he?
I really do think that Jeremy Corbyn is going to be a worried man now. If he looks at the results of what took place in Italy today, we have got a brilliant future going forward, Nigel, and certainly full credit to yourself and everybody else has tried to get this Brexit for us. And I really do feel we need to go forward on a positive position now, anyway.
Is the end of the EU nigh, John?
I really do think it is. I mean, Italy's the first one. We know quite well. There's lots of dissension in Spain and Portugal. I really do feel that the EU could well be in a serious decline now.
Not something, John, that I personally would feel very sad about. Thank you. Robin in Herne Hill is calling. Good evening, Robin.
Good evening, Nigel. Yes, a good result from Italy, both from the left and right anti-EU parties like Syriza in Greece.
Yep.
Totally opposed to Brussels.
Yes, by the way, Robin, the point you make's valuable. A lot of people think, EU opposition is all right-wing. It's not, is it? Because Syriza was very left-wing.
No, I mean, I'd probably oppose you on certain issues, even though I was a member of UKIP for a very long time.
Right.
I left 4 years ago, but that's irrelevant. But I'm worried about... I saw a film called Z about the Greek dictatorship, and that lasted from 67 to 74. So Europe is used to dictatorships where we're not. It's recent history. Like
that is very true, because, of course, Franco and Salazar and the colonels in Greece, and no, that's absolutely true. So what do you think? I mean, you know, we voted Brexit, Robin, and you kind of get those arguments. What do you think made the Italians do what they did?
Well, youth unemployment, the fact that they want the lira back, they can see that they're going to be shredded like the Greeks. When you remember that Cyprus, a British territory, the people there were charged for their own bank account, except it's their own money.
They were bail-ins, weren't they?
Yes, I mean I'm glad that the EU is having trouble, but I'm not glad if it breaks up in violence, which I think it will, like the Soviet Union or the Nazis.
Well, I hope, Robin, that this breaks up democratically. Thank you for your call. And Robin makes the point there about the youth. So, amongst the 18 to 30-year-olds, 44% of them voted for the Five Star Movement. And isn't it funny that right across Europe, we see the under-30s voting for anti-establishment parties of the left, the right and the centre. And yet in this country, it is the youth that are voting for the establishment parties and voting for the EU. We're in a different place. Let's try Dennis in Bournemouth. Dennis, good evening.
Good evening, Nigel.
So what does this result mean to you, Dennis?
Well, what I think it means is that this is really a warning shot across the bows for the EU. And I think the net result of this is they're going to harden their attitude towards the UK. They're going to make doing a deal very, very difficult. And I think we need to recognise that now.
Dennis, how could it be harder than it's been already, with Monsieur Barnier talking down to us, treating our Prime Minister like a little schoolgirl, trying to put punishment clauses into any new agreement we sign? I mean, they couldn't be worse than they've been, surely, Dennis?
Yeah, well, we all realise that, Nigel, but the government and Theresa May don't seem to realise that. You know, we've got this meaningful vote coming along. I think we've got to get in before that, because this meaningful vote could be a disaster.
OK, so Dennis, your point is that the EU is facing an existential crisis, even more today than it was yesterday, which will make our renegotiation even tougher.
Yeah, because I think all along the EU have got one objective in mind. It's all been flared up with these different deals and concessions being made by Theresa May. But at the end of the day, they don't want us to leave. Now, if they don't want us to leave, what's their strategy?
Yeah, to make it...
Has to be to make it as difficult as possible.
Yeah, no, Dennis...
Now they get this Italian result in, that's going to make them even more nervous.
Dennis, even more reason, surely, for our Prime Minister to stand up and be strong.
I think we've got to go further than that. I think we mustn't just listen to what the EU is saying. We've got to predict what they really mean and what they're going to do. Now, in my mind, if we do predict that, there's only one way to go. We don't wait for a meaningful vote.
We go.
With a parliament that is full of Remainers. We do something now.
Yeah. No, Dennis, listen, thank you. So all of the callers so far agreeing that the Italian result moves the Eurosceptic movement further on, but Dennis from Bournemouth saying, actually, that could be a problem for us. It might make Barnier even more unpleasant than he's been so far. Difficult to believe. But tell me, all those three previous callers are wrong. Tell me I'm wrong. Tell me somehow this result makes the EU stronger. You can do that by calling 0345 6060 973. You're listening to the Nigel Farage Show, exclusive in LBC. It's now 7:16. Big change in Italy as the anti-establishment five-star movement gets 1 in 3 votes. And the fiercely Eurosceptic League gets nearly 18% of their vote, and their leader in a press conference says the euro has been a huge mistake for Italy. So I'm asking you, is the end of the EU nigh? But before we get there, a little thought on my friend across the pond in DC, the Donald. So over the weekend, Trump did what he does very regularly. He promised during the election campaign to put tariffs on what he saw as strategic resources. So he's putting a 25% tariff on steel and a 10% tariff on, well, we call it aluminium. I guess he'd call it aluminum. People are always shocked and stunned and surprised when Trump actually does what he said he'd do during his election campaign. And the response from Brussels is, well, I quote the European Commission, "We will issue a swift, firm and decisive response to this threat." So they're talking now about increasing the tariffs that exist already on Tennessee bourbon, on Levi jeans, on Harley-Davidson bikes. So, folks, it's really easy. Trump's the baddie, because he's for protectionism. The EU are the goodies, because they're for free trade. Apart from this, the EU have already put tariffs on aluminium and steel. But that's okay. When the European Union put tariffs on aluminium and steel, they're still the good guys. When Trump does it, he's the devil. Talk about rank hypocrisy. Back to Italy. I'm going to go to Ludo, a brand new caller to this show. He's calling from Reading. Good evening, Ludo.
Hi, good evening, Andrew. How are you?
I'm very well. Now, I'm going to have half a guess that you're Italian.
Yes, correct. Exactly.
Right. So what do you make, Ludo, of these results overnight?
Well, actually, the point is that my father was actually running for the election for the Five Star Movement. And what I would like to say is that the Five Star Movement somehow encapsulates all the frustration of the Italians or the standards, the politics.
Yeah.
You know, the PD for one side and, and the other politics as well. That's why they got those votes, basically, because they are fed up of this. And, the fact that I don't believe that it's the end of the European Union if you put them in power. But, of course, it's a signal that they are giving to the rest of Europe that something has to change.
Well, Ludo, I've been very clear tonight that the League are the really strong anti-EU party, that the Five Star Movement, when Beppe Grillo was very much in charge, who, is a friend of mine, I know him very well, we had a very good congratulatory phone call today. Beppe was pretty Eurosceptic. I think it's true to say that the new leader, Luigi Di Maio, is less Eurosceptic. And within the League, and absolutely, there are people there are people with my view on the European Union, others who have a different view. So you're right. Actually, if we sort of define the centre of the Five Star Movement, they want change in the European Union. Would that, to you, Ludo, be a fair, way of describing them?
Well, I think if you look at, for instance, the PD, the majority of the votes, they lost a lot of votes because those that went to the Five Star Movements, but it was a signal against the current PD, the current left-wing party, that they are really fed up of this. They are looking for change, and that this is the main thing. That young Italians, as you said, they voted for the Five Star Movement because they want something new, something different.
They want something new and they want change. No, Ludo, I get that. I thank you. Sam on Facebook says, good stuff, Italy. Well done, true patriots. Roger says, the EU won't give up its power lightly. Shades of what Dennis said to us earlier on the phone. Dennis, who, of course, felt that because of this, Monsieur Barnier would get even tougher with the UK. Gary says, another nail in the EU's coffin, thankfully. And Shazwellin says, I can see that Britain will be successful post-Brexit. The Italian youth will follow and create a better Italy. The end is nigh for the European Union. Well, that's what I think, I have to tell you. The UK is having difficulty, I get on text, leaving the EU. Can you imagine what difficulty Italy will have, says Peter. Well, the thing is, Peter, if everyone wants to leave the EU, the thing will then actually be bust. Hi, Nigel, says Anita from Kent. I'm so excited about the results in Italy. I really hope this will be the beginning of the end of the EU. If this happens, I will have a party. The best thing I've heard since Brexit. And Anita, no invitation to me. I am very, very upset about that. Mike is calling from Clacton-on-Sea. Good evening, Mike.
Good evening, Nigel. Nice to speak to you again.
Good to speak to you. And you've been on this show before. What do you make? What do you make of the Italians?
I'm elated. One little... I agree with everything everybody said, but I think we were the ones that started the demise of the EU with your good self up front.
So was Brexit, Mike, to you, was that the first domino going down?
Yes, I think so. I think that's put the other people in Europe wise to the fact that the EU is going to be bust. And I think, unfortunately, Italy will go the same way as Greece if they stay in.
What?
I think the Germans are going to step in and get all the utilities under their belt again if they bail them out, which I think they will need to.
Well, they've certainly, Mike. I mean, what's very interesting is that the Eurozone, and let's be objective about this, the Eurozone has had a very, very good last year in terms of growth. But the one big country not sharing in that, of course, has been Italy, where now, net, for 20 years, there has been no growth at all.
That's right. The EU will go bust. It's only a matter of time. You've got Poland, you've got Hungary, are all on the edge. France, they're nearly skint anyway.
Well, the French have managed to live being skint for years and done very well at it. So,
ridiculous. The German, I don't think the German people will put up with this, because they're the only ones that can. They've got the money and the know the wherewithal to do it.
So, Mike, is it, to quote Fraser in Dad's Army, is it all doomed?
I think so. Yeah, I don't mind saying that. I think they are doomed. I think there's life expectancy. I'm a positive person with Brexit. I voted for it, and I think we're going to get it. but I'm not sure how much we're going to get.
That's because of our leaders, Mike. That's because of weak leadership and a pretty hopeless Prime Minister. But so if I said to you, Mike, the European Union had brought peace to the continent since 1945, had brought unparalleled wealth and this is what Guy Verhofstadt says to me, had brought unparalleled wealth and prosperity. How, Mike, can you be pleased if it's doomed?
It's shocking. It is a lying. What's it? I mean, he really is. Well, I don't know.
Well, I was just trying to play devil's advocate, Mike, but I didn't do it very well, did I? Mike, I thank you. Hi, Nigel. Yes, I think the writing is on the wall. It's the end of the EU. What does Chris in Richmond think? Good evening, Chris.
Good evening, Nigel. I think it's the usual nonsense I'm hearing from you. You said the same about before the French election and you said the same about the Dutch election. But the reality is France and the Netherlands have elected people in office who are pro-European still. And as regards the Italian economy, Nigel,
well, France did, Chris.
The problems with Southern Europe are generally speaking internally driven. They are caused by internal bureaucracy, labour laws which are very restrictive. We don't have those labour laws in the UK, for example. And France has always been a very protectionist country when it comes to labour rights. And the same in Italy. So actually,
Chris, would you accept? Chris, would you accept that the euro has been the wrong currency for Italy?
No, for Greece, yes, absolutely, because the Greeks lied their way and they should never have been allowed to get the euro. But the other point I want to make, Nigel, here is there was a lot of discussion about, for example, refugees and the refugee crisis. The Italians have taken a very heavy burden.
They have.
You've got children's hospitals. You've had conservative MPs like Hardy Allen have been over regularly to Italy, and they've seen the children's homes full. But people like you were putting out posters during the EU referendum talking about a breaking point. Now, if this country perhaps had taken its fair share of refugees and honoured its commitment to at least 2,000 child refugees, which it hasn't bothered to do, then perhaps the Italians wouldn't be in this situation.
Well, perhaps
the UK has part of the responsibility.
Chris, perhaps the Italians would not be in this situation had Mr. Juncker not crazily set out a policy in 2015 whereby anybody that effectively got across the Mediterranean and set foot on Greek or Italian soil would be allowed to stay. Isn't that really the message we're getting from Italian voters?
No, Nigel, you and all of the other people...
Don't blame me, Chris. I wasn't in charge.
No, I'm sorry. I'm going to finish. What was your solution to the refugee crisis?
Very simple. Very simple. Do what the Australians did and say nobody that lands on the shores of Europe coming here illegally will ever register for refugee status. And you know something? The Aussies did this back in 2008 to 10, and the boats stopped coming. And if we'd done that, we would have saved thousands of people from drowning.
That is absolutely not the case, Nigel. So they removed the rescue ships, and more people drowned as a result. And I have to say that you still haven't come back to my point. This country could have taken 2,000 child refugees, said it would do so, and then didn't do.
The trouble is, Chris, when we took child refugees, half of them were 35 years old and looked like prop forwards in a rugby scrum. I mean, frankly...
That's your story in the Daily Mail story, but it's factually incorrect, Nigel.
Well, I'm sorry. I'm sorry, Chris, but sadly, the child route has been abused. You're listening to the Nigel Farage Show, exclusive in LBC. It's 7:30. Dramatic overnight results from Italy. 55% of voters voting for parties that are Eurosceptic in a varying shade of degrees. And I'm asking you, does this mean the end of the EU is nigh? Let me what you think on 0345 6060 973. But now, closer to home, our Prime Minister, Theresa May, and I know that I've been really critical of her over the course of the last few months, saying that she's shown a complete lack of leadership, and frankly, she's backed down on many of the promises that she's made. Now, remember that the biggest issue that has dominated British politics over the last few years is the same one that dominated the Italian election yesterday. Yeah, it's immigration. And here is Prime Minister May at the party conference last year.
We are not leaving the European Union only to give up control of immigration all over again.
Well, what can you say? Good, strong, stable leadership. I mean, I almost feel like standing up, and saying, wonderful to have a Prime Minister who is so decisive and so clear on this crucial issue. And yet, here she was speaking on the Andrew Marr Show yesterday.
We will, when we come out of the European Union, be able to set our own immigration rules. That was one of the reasons many people voted to come out of the European Union. But what we're not going to be doing is saying that nobody from the EU is ever going to be able to come to the UK in future.
So easy movement,
and we won't. No, well, that's a phrase that's been used by the Labour Party. I think to try and fudge, try and fudge their approach between free movement and other sorts of immigration. We're going to want to ensure that people from the UK can still go and abroad to the other 27 members of the EU and vice versa. Businesses will want. Well, that's what we will be negotiating. We'll be setting out our immigration rules.
And that's our leader, folks. That is the Prime Minister of our great country, who a few months ago couldn't have been clearer, stronger and more stable. And now she's all over the shop. She's saying we have to do a deal to make sure UK citizens can visit the European Union. She's making it perfectly clear that one of the things we'll be negotiating with the European Union is that actually we'll forge this policy together rather than taking back control of our borders. And she wonders why she's in trouble as Prime Minister. There is no direction, there is no leadership, there is no clarity, and frankly, she has not given that pathetic performance yesterday honouring the Brexit vote. Right. I've got that off my chest. Let's get back to Italy and whether the end of the EU is nigh. And we're going to speak to Stefan, who's calling from Poland. Good evening, Stefan.
Good evening, Nigel. It's my first time on this show, and I just wanted to ask,
Well, you're very welcome, Stefan. Whereabouts in Poland are you?
Thank you very much. I'm in Wrocław, in Breslavia.
Right.
But regarding my question, at the moment, I don't know whether this will be the last, the final years of the EU. I'm not sure. It could be a domino effect with Brexit and populist movements in France and the Netherlands and Italy and also. But perhaps my question is, what do you think about this? Do you think that what do you think Italy would be its relation with a post-Brexit scenario in Europe? And also, do you think a coalition government would be stable? Sorry, yeah.
I tell you what I do know, Stefan. I said earlier on this show that I know Beppe Grillo well, and that I've sat since 2014. The five-star MEPs and the UKIP MEPs have sat together, and we are 80% by membership of our group in the European Parliament. And we've got other Eurosceptic groups from other countries, but we are the two big groups. So I've worked very closely with the five-star movement. Many of them have become good friends of mine. What I'm very conscious of is, whilst they do have varying shades of Euroscepticism, they are fiercely anti-establishment. They believe that Italy has become incredibly corrupt. And the one thing, Stefan, they all keep saying to me is they desperately want for the EU to do a sensible free trade deal with the United Kingdom because they're worried about Italian exports. And I just hope whatever coalition government gets formed, they put a bit of pressure on Juncker, Barnier and all that lot.
Well, I certainly hope so, because I think definitely the EU has to reform in some way, or otherwise it will eventually collapse. And just one final question.
Yeah.
How stable do you think this Italian coalition will eventually come? Will it be a...
Well, it's very tough to see, Stefan. If you look at the numbers, as I said earlier, the five-star movement and the League between them might need a little bit of help from one of the minor parties, but they could make 50% and form a government. But Salvini, who leads the League, has said he wants it to be a centre-right coalition, and he would regard Five Star as being perhaps centre or maybe even a touch centre-left. So it's very tough to see right at the moment, Stefan, where this will go. Let's hope they form a government more quickly than the Germans managed to, who put their coalition together yesterday after 5 whole months. And why, Stefan? Because the anti-EU AfD upset the arithmetic. So whatever coalition gets formed, whatever way you view this, yesterday's results in Italy are, I think, a further step down the road to either a fundamental reform of the European Union, but not that I believe that's possible, or actually to it ending, and something I hope better coming along. And do you listen, Stefan, to the show regularly?
Yes, sometimes I listen to you and other callers on LBC, but this is my first time calling in, and so far it's great. I'm currently writing a MA paper on populism throughout Europe, and I've got the Cinque Stelle movement and UKIP and FN and all that. So this really provides a very good insight into my paper, and I'd like to thank you very much for your...
Well, I want to thank you. No, thank you very much indeed. Thank you, Stefan, from somewhere there out near Bratislava. I'm not quite sure where, but that was great, wasn't it? Nigel, the Italian right, maybe you're a sceptic, but unlike you and your silly cohorts, they're smart enough to know it's better to remain part of the European Union, says Christopher. Well, I'll tell you what, Christopher, don't go out for a drink with Matteo Salvini, because I think his views are pretty much the same as mine. Nigel, the EU is doomed. It's a failed, Frankenstein-like experiment, says Paul. Nigel, the UK should take responsibility for the refugees crisis because Tony Blair and George Bush invaded Iraq and David Cameron and Obama destroyed Libya. It's not the refugees' fault, says Sid. Sid, I have some sympathy with that point of view. I really do think that the bombing of Libya and the getting rid of Gaddafi, and that's not to say he's a good guy, was probably the worst foreign policy choice I've seen in my lifetime. And that may have added to the migratory flow, but that does not justify the Juncker EU refugee policy or the madness of Merkel, which I think was the worst foreign policy decision made by any European premier in the last 75 years. That's my view, but you can always tell me I'm wrong by calling 0345 6060 973. I'm going to go to Chris in Stoke-on-Trent. Chris, good evening.
Evening, Nigel. You all right?
Well, I'm all right. Actually, no, I'm more than all right. I'm delighted. I'm seeing massive political change. I'm seeing soft left socialist parties being destroyed. I think it's all a good thing.
It is indeed. I spoke to you 2 or 3 weeks ago, reference the George Soros story.
Oh, yes, I remember now.
You asked if there's too much political interference from outside of the country.
Yep.
The reason for me call is, do you think what's happening with Italy now and what's happened with Donald Trump over the last couple of days is going to work in our favour?
Well, what's happened with Donald Trump over the last couple of days is firstly what he promised, secondly is in response to a European Union that masquerades as being about free trade but actually is a protectionist bloc, and thirdly, Chris, shows why we absolutely need to have our own free trade deal with America, because clearly the European Commission and the Donald Trump administration, which I will now predict is going to win a second term in 2020, are on a head-on collision. So that makes, to me, an even stronger argument for us having our own trade deal.
But the British government are proving that they aren't capable of doing these negotiations, and I just think that some pressure from the EU from another angle will help us.
Well, it may and it may not. But, Chris, you know what? I had a phone call yesterday that in a sense, gets to the root of all arguments about sovereignty, whether in this country or whether it's Mr. Salvini in Italy. We had a guy on yesterday from Perth in Western Australia. He'd never called the show before. He said, look, we in Australia are a country of 25 million people. We are self-governing. We are independent. We are a first world nation. We make our own trade deals all over the world as we see fit. How can it be that in a country like yours, many of your politicians don't have the self-confidence to believe you can do that? And Chris, that is the message. Sovereignty isn't just about being independent, isn't just about controlling your borders. It's about believing in yourselves and your ability to make your own decisions. And I think Italy yesterday got just a little bit closer to that. You're listening to the Nigel Farage Show, exclusive on LBC. It's now 7:45. When a stand-up comedian forms a political party that then wins a national election, you have to ask yourself, who is the joke on? And in my view, the joke is on the European Union. The Italian people clearly want more sovereignty, want more control over their lives. Is this the end of the European Union? Well, of course, this Italian result itself is not the end of the European Union. But, folks, it is part of a trend that was set back in 2016. It started with Brexit. It went on to Trump. Believe me, that revolution is still rolling. That's my view. I wonder what Anthony in Bromley makes of that. Good evening.
Good evening, Nigel. How are you?
I'm very well. I'm pleased because, people that I've worked with for years in the European Parliament are now about to run Italy. So I'm very pleased about that.
Nigel, you're totally wrong, because everything that you say about the EU, you're just talking about dividing everybody instead of everybody being united. It's totally wrong.
Is it?
Yeah, you're just into, like, encouraging hate speech, encouraging...
Anthony, I'm not stopping you, but you're sounding a bit muffled. Can you speak a bit more clearly into the mouthpiece, please?
Yeah, sure. I just think that...
That's better, we've got you. Right, now you can really have a go at me now. Come on, I'm here, you're on LBC, have a go.
Yeah, it's totally wrong. What you're doing is you're trying to divide everybody in Europe instead of us all getting together. You see differences in people just because of the country they come from. It's just not right.
Well, Anthony, I believe that the nation-state is the natural, normal building block that people want to be a part of, who are happy to pay their taxes to, who in extremis they'll defend. That doesn't mean, Anthony, I don't want a Europe in which we cooperate together, we trade together, we are best mates together. Rather like we're all living in the same street, Anthony. What I don't want is us to give all that authority, all that power, all of that democracy away to people like Mr. Juncker.
Yeah, but the more we divide, and the more people get into their own nationalism, etc., you know what's going to happen? It's going to be World War III.
Anthony, please. Look, I tell you what. I know the architects of this European project thought that it was about bringing peace. They believed that if you destroyed the nation-state, it would bring peace. But they got something wrong, Anthony. If nation-states are democratic, if those governments are controlled by their electorate, they will never go to war with each other. And I challenge anybody listening to LBC or on broader social media, give me one example of a mature, functioning democracy going to war with another.
Yeah, but...
there isn't one.
What you're trying to create, it's not going to be democracies. It's going to be like fascist dictators.
How dare you? How dare you? When have I ever suggested that I wanted a fascist dictatorship?
Well, it's, all these, you go on about all these immigrants coming over.
Hang on, when have you ever heard me say that? I've talked about controlling our borders. I've talked about being like 200 other countries in the world who make decisions about who should go and live there. Anthony, what I'm arguing for is normality. What is weird is to give up control of your borders and let Mr. Juncker, I mean, he wasn't much use before lunch, let alone afterwards, run our country.
Yeah, but that's your idea of normality. Mine is, let's all get on together. Let's all create a better world together. Let's get our institutions into these places like Libya, and so they wouldn't want to all come over here in the first place.
Anthony, I wouldn't fight you on that at all. I think Libya was a catastrophic mistake. How it can be that only 12 MPs were against the bombing of Libya and the removal of Gaddafi, which opened the door for ISIS, I don't know. But Anthony, let me just ask you, I mean, do you believe in the European project as it's currently constructed?
I believe it should definitely change a bit, but I believe in it much more than I believe in us being a separate nation away from it.
All right, fine. And the question tonight I was asking is, does the Italian result mean the end of the EU is nigh? Do you accept, Anthony, that yesterday's result in Italy brings the EU's demise a little bit closer?
No.
No, all right, fine. OK, we disagree. Anthony, I thank you very much indeed. Brian from Essex says, listening to you, Nigel, I wonder how long you have been promotions manager for Jeremy Corbyn, considering your stance on Mrs May. Well, Brian, if you like people like Mrs May, who stand up and say, we will control our borders and we'll be in charge and the party conference all chair, and then gives a mealy mouth, well, of course, we have to make sure that we've got the regulations right so that people can go on day trips to Calais. I mean, God help us. Mahmood is calling from Putney. Good evening, Mahmood.
Good evening, Nigel. I just wanted to make the point that, we never complained in Europe when, after the, when in South Africa, when apartheid, white minority rule after that, you had an influx of South Africans, also Australians as well, and New Zealanders coming to this country, and nobody complained. It's only when you have refugees coming over from parts of the world that aren't necessarily white that all of a sudden people in Europe are complaining, and you're
okay,
yes,
right.
I mean, it's
right. Now, there are two debates here, Mahmood. One is open doors to the European Union, and the real objection and the real argument that led up to that referendum were too many people from Central and Eastern Europe, too many people from 8 and then 10 former communist countries being freely available to come, and all of them were white, Mahmood. All of them.
Yeah, but why didn't we complain about the South Africans and the Australians and the New Zealanders coming?
Because they didn't get automatic rights to residency. They used to get short-term work permits and worked in pubs and barbers' shops and whatever, and had to leave at the end of 2 years. It's very different.
Yeah, but the thing is, why are we complaining about these refugees coming over from Libya and other places when we've created the problem over there? And it's not. You talk about Libya as being just an aberration. It's not. It's part of a pattern that Europe. I mean, what Belgium did to the Congo. And I can go on. What Britain did to parts of Africa. Transatlantic slavery. Our institutions.
We ended slavery. Mahmood, hang on.
No.
We ended slavery. We ended slavery.
We created slavery.
We ended slavery, and we should be proud of the fact that we actually
created slavery.
We forced other countries using the Royal Navy to stop slavery too. And now, and do you know something? There are now slave markets in Libya. All right, so you could argue we helped bring it back again through bad foreign policy. But we shouldn't hang our heads in shame over this, should we?
Of course we should. We created slavery. The transatlantic slave trade was created by Europe.
Well,
was it somebody else that did that? I mean, I don't know. Was it?
How does this? Help me. How does this link to the Italian elections yesterday?
Because what you have is you have Western Europe wanting to have its cake and eating it. They've been exploiting countries around the world for centuries.
All right, Mahmood.
And now when they come over here wanting to get something back,
I think Mahmood, I think you've missed the point, but I thank you. I've got time for one last caller. Paul, a brand new caller to LBC, who lives in delightful Filey in North Yorkshire. Paul, hello.
Good evening, Nigel. I think David Davis and Theresa May's birthday and Christmas came all at once yesterday.
Right, how's that?
Because we have now got a man on the inside. So our good friends Juncker and Barnier cannot boast about the 27 all against you. Mm-hmm. If the gentleman that leads Five Star Coalition is as anti-EU as you suggest, and you know your staff, then I think we've got a friend on the inside. And I think now we've got to go in hard. He's going to, in Cockney parlance, he's going to grass them up.
Paul, I got to go, mate. That's the end of the show. Now, the Five Star Movement are not as anti-EU as me, but they are critical. There's no doubt the Lega, who've done incredibly well on nearly 18%, are pretty much as hardline as I am on the European Union. Either way, folks, it's been a massive shift in politics overnight. You've been listening to The Nigel Farage Show here on LBC. I'm back tomorrow night at 7 o'clock. Coming up at 10 tonight, it's Ian Collins. But up next, it's Clive Bull.
Nigel, thank you.